Hello everyone, this is Jay from BroGaming TCG, and today I am coming at you with another Road to Worlds episode, which today we are playing my Trevenant Garbodor deck, which is a budget deck. So basically, I really want to talk about budget decks and where they are right now in the meta, and specifically where Garbodor Trevenant is in the standard meta right now. So I'm just going to get straight into this. A little explanation though. Right now we are playing up against a really good deck, and this I thought this was a really good match to showcase my point of where this deck is in the meta. So we are playing up against Sylveon GX, which I believe it's a quad Sylveon GX. It's not a Garbodor Sylveon GX. I know some people are playing that variant and some people are playing quad Sylveon GX. But this is a very good card in the meta right now, and it's a very big deck in the meta right now. It has really good setup, and it has a pretty decent attack, plus its GX attack isn't terrible, though it's not the best one out there. So a lot of people have swayed towards the Sylveon GX, and I've talked about Sylveon GX in some of my later videos. My Is Quad Lapras Dead Road to Worlds episode actually speaks a lot on Sylveon GX and where it kind of is in the metagame right now, so I'm not going to go too in-depth about that. But currently, the budget decks in the meta, kind of like Passimian. Passimian is a perfect example of this, where people really liked the card. It was a really good card, and it had really good potential, and people built the Mew Passimian deck around the potential of the Passimian card, and it does work, and it has been played in tournaments. The only problem is that it just doesn't have enough oomph behind it. It doesn't have that massive power. It doesn't have the HP that it needs, and that's kind of the same problem that this deck, Garbodor Trevenant, runs into. Both cards are sitting at, 120 HP. Now, going up against a Sylveon deck like this, that's not too much of a problem, because now your cards are 2-hit KOs, because Sylveon only does 110 damage. Without Professor Kukui, they're not going to one-hit KO you, which is good. But most cards are. Volcanion, which is a big deck as well in the meta right now, is going to one-hit KO you. Quad Lapras would one-hit KO you, which I know Quad Lapras isn't big. Decidueye could one-hit KO you with two Decidueyes on the field, because you're doing 40 damage plus the 90 damage is 130. Let's see, there is, most cards in the format are going to be able to do 120 damage without Professor Kukui. It's pretty easy. Turbo Darkrai, it's pretty easy to do 120 damage, stuff like that. The only real impact of this deck is the fact that it has some massive damage output, and that's why I think people are drawn towards it. Garbodor has some massive damage output, especially very late in the game. It can get upwards of 250 damage, especially with a choice band on it. Trevenant is good early game, when people are holding trainer cards in their hand, and it can also be, good middle game. But unfortunately, I don't even think I get a Trevenant out in this game, and when I do get a Trevenant out, I don't think I am actually able to use it, because I do struggle quite a bit in this game on getting the right cards, and that's something that a lot of budget deck players struggle with, is having to face up against really strong opponents. So you're facing people on the online TCG that are playing big meta decks, that are practicing for leagues and all this stuff, or just playing good decks because they want to win. Me, on the other hand, I tend to play budget decks because, one, they're fun to play, and two, they allow me to really think about my moves. So if you guys, once again, I'm referring to one of my past videos on why you should play budget decks, is a really good video, and I talk a lot on the fact that budget decks are really good to play because it makes you think about your moves, because you're playing up against a deck that kind of runs itself, especially with Sylveon GX. There's really one way to play it. It's really simple to play, and there's not much thought to it. So when playing that deck, you really don't have to think too much. It's kind of played for you. The mechanic of the game is it kind of just plays itself. Now, playing Trevenant Garbodor, especially against decks that kind of play themselves, is something that you have to think about. You have to think about your moves. You have to think about, which one do I want in the active position? Which one do I want to be attacking with? How many item cards are in his discard pile? How many cards do I think, how many trainer cards do I think are in his hand? How big is his hand? How big is his discard pile? What's his, how many cards are in his deck? There's a lot of things that you have to think about. How many prize cards does he have? Can I afford to lose one of my cards? There's a lot of things that you have to think about when playing these decks, and it really makes you think, and it really, really kind of grasps on to the fact that I almost believe that it makes you better, because when transitioning over to a strong meta deck, it helps. It helps you think about situations, because when you're in this bad situation, you can think your way out of it, and that's kind of why I almost lean towards Volcanion as one of the better tier decks, because Volcanion doesn't exactly run itself. I know that its mechanic is definitely a little bit different than some of the decks that we have been seeing, and some of the decks that people like to play, such as Turbo Darkrai. Turbo Darkrai, there was really one way to play it. You want to get as much dark energy out on the field. Now, Volcanion, you gotta think about how many Volcanions you have on the bench, stuff like that. I mean, it's not exactly a deck that doesn't run itself, because it does. There's really one way to play Volcanion, and that's about it. But you do have to think about what you want in the active at a certain time. So Volcanion is one of those decks that you have to put a little bit more thought into, versus something like Sylveon, that's basically Magical Ribbon setup, get 3 energy, Fairy Wind, and that's pretty much it for Sylveon GX. And that's why I think Sylveon GX does run better with Garbodor, because Garbodor packs that late game punch, and Sylveon really can stall really, really well. It does a really good job at stalling. It has that 200 HP and stuff like that. So, and that's kind of the stuff that you want. So really, it's really your preference of deck that you like to play. Do you like to think more about the game and really get into the strategy part of it? Or do you tend to like the decks that are fun to play, that kind of run themselves and kind of give you that relaxed feeling, after a long, stressful day, come back to your house, play some Pokemon, and you want to play a deck that's going to give you that relaxation and not give you a headache from playing? Because I know sometimes while playing my Trevenant Garbodor deck, I come out of a game with a massive headache, because I've been thinking so hard and so in depth on which move I should make and what kind of thing I should, and what's my next play, because I'm always thinking about that. So, and that's another thing, is where I believe that it separates the good players from the mediocre players. Mediocre players really rely on the deck to run itself, and good players don't really so much rely on the deck to run itself, but play on the fact that it's an easier deck to understand. So if you're not really getting my gist, that's okay, but I'll try to explain it in a little bit easier terms to understand. So basically, let's take people who place top 16 consistently, at regional tournaments. How do they walk into a regional tournament with a deck that is exactly built the same as your deck? You guys have the same exact deck list, but you place further down than the person who placed in the top 16. And you're thinking to yourself, well, we have the same exact deck list. What about the matchups that we went up against? Oh, well, he actually went up against pretty decent matchups, Volcanion, Turbo Darkrai. I went up against, a couple mirror matches and stuff like that. So, matchups weren't really the big influence. So what was the big influence? And I think where the separation lies is between them understanding the deck and you just playing it. So, and I think that's kind of what budget decks do, budget decks, when first building a budget deck, I actually tend to lose quite a bit in the beginning of, and really, I really have to think about the deck and what it's going to work well with. And I do several edits to it while building something like my Quad Labras deck that you guys have seen in past videos. I really only spent about 20 minutes building that deck, and I've never made any edits to it at all. I haven't even added water patches to it. So, but with this Trevenant Garbodor deck, I have already made 5 edits to it. I have lost a lot of matches with it, but won a good few, and that is something that I enjoy. Is when I win with this deck, I'm like, oh, that's really nice to know that I won with it, and it really brings that pride to me of winning with a deck that obviously is always at a disadvantage up against decks like this. So, I mean, so there's a debate on it, where Trevenant Garbodor is in the meta, but at this time, I would say it's at the same point in time, like I said at the beginning of the video, it's at the same spot where Passimian and Mew was when Sun and Moon came out. So it's basically the budget deck that came out of Guardians Rising. Passimian was the one that came out of Sun and Moon. Garbodor Trevenant is the one that is going to be coming out of, Guardians Rising. Even just Quad Garbodor, that's a budget deck too, and that one is pretty good too. So anyway, guys, this is where I lose the match. Actually, he decks me out. But anyways, guys, I'd like to thank everyone for watching this video. And don't forget, guys, to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you have not already. Anyways, guys, this has been Jay from BroGaming TCG. Don't forget, trainers, to always keep on battling and pursue your dreams.